Alex here with a video on Roe v. Wade, specifically what do they call it? They don't use the word strike down. They either call it abrogating or the disapproval or the overruling or whatever. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that the precedent set forth in the Roe v. Wade decision is no longer in effect. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. I'm going to do two disclaimers. The first disclaimer is that since I'm not a lawyer, I really avoid getting too into the weeds. There's probably 25,000 lawyer channels that are talking about this and have already talked about it yesterday, I'm sure. And so if you really want to get into that stuff, you can watch one of their channels. I'm also only going to spend about 25% on actual Roe v. Wade. There's two other big things that I want to talk about. The first being the Constitution and the reality of it. And then the second thing being the role of the legislature, which is the really sad part. Okay, so one more disclaimer is I feel like if I just go straight into my analysis, people aren't going to go all the way to the end. They're just going to become outraged, and it's going to make it seem like I'm like in favor of the decision. But in all honesty, the conclusion that I'm going to reach, I'll just tell you now, is that number one, the policy within Roe v. Wade is correct and should be a national policy. And then number two, the Supreme Court of the United States and the federal judiciary, even though their decision was consistent with the law, in my opinion, they still are deserving of public backlash. So I'll explain why. I just want to give those conclusions right now so people can bear with me as I go through this. So there's an interesting thing I want to talk about with the Constitution, and I have separate videos on the topic. I think I have one or two. The more that you learn about the law, the more the Constitution loses it's almost like you have it on a pedestal. When you're just an ordinary person, you don't know anything about it, the courts and the law and anything. It's almost like a religious, superstitious, like super powerful thing. It is an amazing document. It is powerful, but the more you learn about how the law works and the courts work and everything, the more you do end up realizing it's not what you originally thought it was. The thing about the Constitution that's remarkable is that it was created to restrain legislators. Before, I guess, there were some legislative bodies that had very little or no restraint. They could pass whatever law they wanted. That was just how it worked. And if you think about it, in principle, that's how it kind of seems like it's supposed to work. You elect these people, these representatives, they get together, they create rules, they vote, and they create rules. And so the notion that there are rules that they shouldn't create is kind of silly on its face, because if they shouldn't create it, then they wouldn't create it, right? Well, that's not what the colonists, came to think. They realized that there were all sorts of rules that the legislature would create just because they could, even though they were immoral or wrong. And if you didn't like it, too bad. And so they decided we need to make a separate set of rules that the rule makers have to follow. And it was remarkable because it conceded that there were rules that would be made that would hurt people, and in essence you couldn't trust the rule makers. It's such a strange reality, and it's true. It's true. And I think a lot of times it's because the rule makers are putting their own interests above, or their special interest slash funding, what do they call them, lobbyists' interests above the public's and above their own. In any event, what I was trying to say is that's what it really is if you think about it. And when people talk about constitutional violations, they're basically talking about, so this legislative body got together. It's a legitimate body. They were all elected. They all voted something. It was a majority vote. There weren't any shenanigans. It was a law that was created with the support of these people that we elected to create laws. But they shouldn't have done that, because there's this document that says these specific things you can't touch. And it allows people, typically a minority, but not always, to go before a court and say, okay, this rule was created and the rule makers violated a rule by creating it, which you could just use, like, for example, the Second Amendment. It's something about you shall not infringe the law on bearing arms. I don't know the exact verbiage of it, but there was a decision on that recently too, I think this week. And it was a decision saying that the laws in, I guess, New York that said you had to prove some kind of special need for self-defense to be allowed to carry a gun in public. And the Supreme Court said, okay, well, that's a law they made in New York, and there's nothing wrong about how they made it. They passed a law, followed all the rules, created the law, but unfortunately they broke the rule that they're not supposed to make this rule. And that's really what it is. And that's really, when you think about it, what all of the stuff about Roe v. Wade comes to in the end, is that all of these different states created all of these different rules on abortion, and some states were pretty, open about it and let people get them. Other states restricted them heavily, and then some states banned them outright. And what happened was people started to sue and argue that there are parts of the Constitution that do not allow the government to create those rules. So just like I was talking about with the Second Amendment, we also have similar things going on with the First Amendment, which is free speech. The same exact thing happened, which is that people were saying, yeah, these laws are legitimate and they're being created by legislative bodies, but they violate the Constitution. And so the rule makers violated a rule about creating specific rules. And that's what it turned into, is this convoluted series of lawsuits that got all the way to the Supreme Court. And then there was this debate, and the justices published Roe v. Wade, which created this decision that said that the lawmakers violated the Constitution in certain ways, and that they couldn't restrict abortion in certain ways. And so that's really what ended up controlling abortion for decades. Is it wasn't lawmakers, it was judges, because that's all the people who were supporting the right to choice could do. They couldn't solve the problem legislatively. They didn't have the numbers in their states, or even if they did have the numbers, they didn't have the support of the legislators. And so the only thing they could do was go over their head and ask the judges to basically say, you can't do that. So here we are today, and now there's new judges, and those new judges are saying that those old judges should not have published that precedent, that it shouldn't have ever been, I guess, a federal court issue, and that it always should have been up to the various different states. And it's interesting that the media tries to characterize this as 9 judges making a decision for the whole country, when if you actually read the opinion, it's the judges saying the opposite, which is that the people in those particular states should be making the rules, not us. There's this almost like a propaganda. It's really disturbing when I see that, because it's disinformation. What it comes down to, in my opinion, is that I don't think that the legislatures in this country are really there for us. And I don't think it's probably been that way for a long time. And I think a lot of the public has completely lost confidence in their legislators. And the situation is so bad that everything is like falling to the courts to like save the country almost. It's like, I honestly don't believe legislators care what people think. I just don't. I don't believe in public commenting, because I don't think they care. I don't think they listen to people. My honest opinion, I'm not trying to be cynical. This is just a matter of fact sort of observation that I've made. I think that sometimes they will listen to pollsters who tell them, hey, if you say this one particular thing, then lots of people will vote for you. But for the most part, I don't think that they actually care about making things better for the public. I think that they care about their election. I think that they care about their reputation, their connections, their own businesses and lives. I mean, some of them, a minority seems to kind of care, but for the most part, I really just don't think that they're in communication with the public. I don't think that they really talk to the public. And so if you don't talk to the public, then how are you going to really know what the public wants? I think that legislators probably talk to somewhere between maybe 10, 15 people and make their decisions based on those 10 or 15 people. Probably most of them are lobbyists or special interest groups. Maybe a tiny handful of them are are businessmen or people who are maybe leading some of these groups. So like even when it comes to like legislators that really care about the public, they're probably only talking to like half a dozen of these leaders of various public interest groups, which is good. It's better than nothing. But that's really where I think the problem is that if you don't have like a special interest group or a lobby, you're just not going to get cared about. And that's probably half sad that they don't go further, but it's also probably just that they probably can't listen to 2 or 3,000 people, 20,000 people, because they don't have time. If they did, they wouldn't be able to get anything done anyway, because everyone has different opinions. So like everything that I just described, on the one hand, it's like, oh, that's sad that they don't care. But on the other hand, it's like, how can they? They only have like 2 ears. How are they supposed to care and listen to all 25, 30, 40,000 constituents? They can't. And so like a lot of people talk about how lobbyists and special interest groups are bad, and it's like one of the only ways to talk to legislators, because they can only listen to so many people before they can't get anything done. So I guess kind of in a roundabout way, I just explained that anything that anyone thinks should be cared about needs a special interest group or a lobby. So yeah, child custody, families, divorce, all that stuff. Yeah, we kind of need one. In any event, let's get back on track. So that's what I think is going on. People don't have any confidence. They don't even see that as a solution. It's like not even on the back of anyone's mind. It's like people saw the solution as Roe v. Wade and those judges and that decision they published. And now that they overturned it, it's like all of the heat is on them. All of the rage is on them. The justices, from their perspective, are probably like, what are you guys mad at us for? We just cleared the path for the lawmakers to take care of this. They are the ones that truly represent the people. And they're the ones that should be making the rules. And the public doesn't see it that way at all. The public doesn't think that their lawmakers give two craps about them. They don't see them as a part of the solution. They don't see them as a path to democracy. They no, they're like, you guys ruined the country because we should have been able to do these abortions whenever we wanted to, or to the extent that the decision in Roe v. Wade allowed, and since you took it away, you're evil. And they went and they like protested the Supreme Court, and they went to the Supreme Court's houses, which I don't think has ever happened in the history of this country. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think people have ever gone to the houses of the justices. And that's a situation that we have right now. So yeah, I'm here at the end, and I hate to say it, but the decision was probably correct, because the Constitution enshrines the right of life and the right of liberty. And how are they supposed to balance those interests in a way that tramples the rights of the state legislatures and the public in those states, which I think the states that are anti-abortion are mostly religious states. But at the same time, even though the decision is correct, the people don't understand that, and they don't have access to be represented in their particular states because of how far gone the legislatures are. And then most importantly, it's the federal courts and the Supreme Court of the United States' fault that everyone hates them, because they take almost no meaningful efforts to educate the public. The federal courts, I think, sometimes think of themselves as the most transparent and public court in the country, and they just aren't. They operate with a tremendous amount of secrecy, and I feel like they are able to sleep at night because they probably tell themselves a bunch of lies, like, anyone can come to a courtroom and sit and watch a hearing. Eyes are rolling into the back of my head. Nobody's going to do that. You could take any of the videos that I've recorded and published, like Kim Blandino, State of Nevada versus Kim Blandino. I don't know how many views, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if you add all the videos up. And how many of those people would have gone to the actual courtroom and sat down and watched? I wouldn't even say one. I would say zero. So when the federal courts are saying, oh, nobody knows how it works, and we're so public, and everyone can see what we're doing, and we're transparent, but we want a camera ban, then in my opinion, they're just lying. They really don't care what the public thinks. They really don't care to educate the public. They have fake transparency, because they say they have transparency, but they won't let people watch through the lens of a camera. And so all of this horrible stuff that's happening to the federal judiciary right now, where the public is losing confidence in them and they hate them, I think they deserve it. And the Supreme Court of the United States and the justices 100% deserve all of the backlash they're getting. Instead of saying, this is not fair, the people don't understand us, they should say, the people don't understand us because we don't even try. Like, they don't even try to let the people understand what they're doing. They don't even try to let people. They've only barely done a few, I guess, audio recordings, which is a complete joke. You know, when they talk about how I've heard this before from lawyers. Oh, he can get a Jabs video. Oh, he can get a transcript. Oh, he can get an audio. I've heard that before. Well, can we just do an audio? It's like an insult to my intelligence. They know that the public won't watch that stuff. They won't. The public's not going to read a transcript. The public's not going to listen to an audio only recording. So really, what these lawyers and judges that are opposed to camera access are trying to do is they're trying to say that in theory, we don't mind people watching, but in actuality, in practice, we don't want people watching. We want a few people to watch. Like, if it's 5 people, that's okay. If it's 10 people, that's okay. But if it's 1 million people, that's not okay. And so even they themselves don't realize how contradictory they are, the doublespeak, because I think subconsciously they're terrified of what people will see when they actually look at the court system. Like I said, the court system can be as much as a dumpster fire as it actually is. And as long as only a dozen or 2 dozen people know that, that's not a concern to them. The concern is 1 million people seeing it. And so that's what really the whole debate on camera access is and has been. They try and make it about the rights of the parties and the distractions, and all that stuff is just a bunch of it's nonsense. What the concern is the difference between 20 people seeing court and 20 million people seeing court. That's really what the discussion is. And if you get down to the nitty gritty, and if everybody who was opposed to camera access was honest about it, that's what their concern would be, is that too many people are going to see that we have a dumpster fire of a court system and it's going to cause outrage. Which in reality, I don't think is true. I think that a lot of our judges are doing a great job. But I think that some of those attorneys and judges are afraid that too many people will see the dysfunction of the courts in this country. So that's why, in my opinion, even though I think the decision in Roe v. Wade is correct because of the competing constitutional interests between life and liberty, I still think that the justices deserve 100% of the backlash they're getting, and that the federal courts, for all of the disrespect that they're getting from the public and the outrage, even though they made a decision that I think was consistent with the law, I think that they 100% deserve all of what they're getting. If the justices of the Supreme Court and the federal judges in the federal courts want this to stop, then they have to let people in. They have to let people see what they're doing. They have to let the public see it through the lens of a camera. And if they start doing that, then they'll get some sympathy from me. But for now, I have no sympathy for them at all. So I hate to say that, even though I think the decision legally was correct, I think that policy, it makes no sense at all. I think that the policy of the entire country should be that abortion should be 100% allowed, consistent with the original Roe v. Wade opinion. I think that it should be whatever kind of law it needs to be, whether it's federal, whether it's at the different states. But I don't think it'll happen. I don't. I don't think that the federal legislature will fix the problem because they don't want to. I think that the GOP represents a lot of the states that are anti-abortion, and so they aren't going to do it because their opinion or position is that our voters like the ban. And I don't think that the state legislatures will fix the problem for the same reason. I think that the state legislatures are going to say, we have maybe 10 million citizens in our state, and more than half of them want a ban. And so that's the way that they're going to look at it. And so that's what's really tragic, is that in this country, it actually is a majority of some people in some jurisdictions that support the ban. It's a really messed up reality. At the very end of the road, that's what it is. I talked about the Constitution a little bit in the beginning, and how, I explained how you kind of, the more you learn, that it comes down from its pedestal. And I just wanted to say one more thing about the Constitution, is that if you look at, this is just sort of an interesting observation. If you look at the amendments and read up on some of the reasons why the amendments were passed, it was almost like a laundry list. Like the original Constitution was written, and then people were like, well, hold on, the king, I guess King George, the crown, England, they used to do this, and we don't like that. So they said, okay, First Amendment, you can no longer be punished for speaking out. And then another group was like, well, hold on, they tried to take all our guns away, so we couldn't fight back. And so they were like, okay, Second Amendment, you can't take people's guns away. Well, hold on, the crown used to like quarter troops in my house, and I didn't like that they could just put soldiers in my house, and I had to like take care of them. Okay, Third Amendment. Well, hold on, the crown used to like take away people's stuff without giving them like a chance to like resist it. Okay, due process, Fourth Amendment. And so that's the interesting thing is, I guess I just didn't see it that way. Like, and these are just the amendments where there's just this sort of laundry list of complaints, and here's all the things that we didn't like that the crown did, and so we're going to amend the Constitution to like each thing that we have a beef with we're going to not allow them to do. I mean, it kind of, for me, took away some of the mystery and the magic, because it was, the amendments themselves were so specific to specific conduct, and it was not as abstract and like principled as I originally thought. Maybe the original Constitution was, but the amendments were, like I said, like a laundry list of complaints. And it really does sort of make you realize that this wasn't drafted by supernaturally intelligent people. They were smart, of course. It was drafted by ordinary people who had a memory of things that the government was doing that they felt were really messed up, and they just had like a list of complaints, and at that particular moment in time they were creating the most powerful legal document in American history. And their laundry list of complaints about all of the laws that were being passed during their time ended up becoming permanently enshrined in the Constitution and controls our government going forward today, now all these hundreds of years later. So it's just like, I mean, I'm not trying to make it sound bad. I'm just trying to make people realize this was a piece of paper that was created by ordinary people, and they very much based it on things that they were upset with at the time. I'm not trying to say that the Constitution should be like gotten rid of. There are ways to change it. Actually, it's built into the law. It's built into the Constitution. So like in the actual Constitution itself, it recognizes that it can be changed. And, that's another thing that's sad, is a lot of people will say, well, if you don't like the Second Amendment, you can try and change it. But the problem is that the process for changing it involves the public. There's two ways to do it. One is through some kind of public, I guess they can ask for a constitutional convention. And then the other way is through the legislature directly. And in any event, it's the same issue, is that a lot of the things that people say they don't want, so like some people don't like the Second Amendment, there's still giant swaths of the country that do like it, and they'll resist any change to it. So it's constitutional democracy is working. It's just working dysfunctionally. And like I said towards the beginning of the video, is I think that most of the blame goes to the legislatures, and the fact that the only thing that they really care about is whatever the lobbyists and the special interest groups that have access to them make them care about. And I know I'm going to beat a dead horse here, but I do think that there's probably no other way for them to communicate with people except through special interest groups and lobbies, because, like I said, they're too distracted and they only have two ears. And so one of the messed up conclusions that I've reached is, if you think that your interests aren't cared about, you probably need a special interest group. And sadly, there are huge sections of the American public where people are way too poor and don't have an interest group, like in family law. All right, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to post them down in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.